Alrighty guys, it is Quamad here today, and I'm bringing you another Dragon Ball Z segment. But once again, I am not alone as I am joined with...
Hey guys, it's Mike here from Laughing Stock Media. How's it going?
And what bizarre topic do we have for them today, Mike?
Well, for today, we're going to have a fun topic in which we're going to be talking about the women of Dragon Ball. Our top 10 hottest women in Dragon Ball Z.
Or in Dragon Ball in general. And what's funny about this, Mike, is that this has been a fun topic that has been requested to me for years. Ever since I started off my Dragon Ball channel, I already had people asking me to do like my top, best looking anime women in Dragon Ball Z. So without wasting any more time, let's get straight into this video. So, starting off with number 10, I have Toei from Dragon Ball Z Universe. Now, I know that she's kind of in a weird spot on this list, considering the fact that Toei is, obviously a demon. But I feel that Toei is pretty attractive. She has a pretty good body, and if you actually look at her first entrance from Dragon Ball Z Universe, she definitely had an eye-popping entrance into the Dragon Ball Xenoverse saga when she first appeared. So I definitely think Toei is, despite, obviously looking different from the other humanoid characters, is definitely a really attractive spot at number 10.
Yeah, that's a pretty good one. I, definitely think that, hey, sometimes being bad is also being beautiful. For my number 10, I have Chi-Chi, and especially Chi-Chi in her prime as what I would call it during the 23rd Tenkaichi Budokai, in which she fought Goku, and obviously Goku didn't even remember who she was because they'd grown up since then. And I would have to say that during that point, not only was she beautiful and very attractive, but she could kick some butt, so I definitely have to put her at number 10 on my list.
We definitely have to admit that a fighting prowess definitely makes a woman hotter.
Oh yeah.
So, moving on to number 9, I have Miss Pizza. Now, a lot of you might not remember so much who Miss Pizza was because she was a very minor character. She's actually a filler/anime only character. She actually does appear in Dragon Ball Super during the first episode, and she was in the Cell games, and she's actually Hercule's promotional agent. And what I find interesting about Miss Pizza is that it was implied that her and Hercule possibly had an affair when he tapped her and she said, "You haven't touched me in a while," like that. So I found that pretty interesting about Miss Pizza, but I could definitely see why Hercule was eyeing her depending on the point of time that Miguel, Hercule's wife, passed away. So I definitely think that Miss Pizza is also a very attractive character who honestly didn't get much limelight, but she was good looking.
Yeah, I have to agree too. As for my number 9, it would have to be Anine, who was Grandpa Gohan's employer during the ending filler of Dragon Ball. And wow, she was able to grow to immense heights, and that's certainly something that could be advantageous in many ways. So I would have to say that she was strong, she was beautiful, and she knew how to throw around her position very well.
Anyways, for number 8, I have Chi-Chi in her prime, and I felt that when her hair was longer when she fought Goku, I thought that was when she was at her best. A funny little scene is that there was actually a quick scene where we see Chi-Chi being spied on by Oolong's group of, I guess you could say, humanoid, anthropomorphic pig friends, which is a very, very funny scene. But a little bit of a funny note for you guys, Chi-Chi actually is a name in Japanese to refer to breasts.
For my number 8, going back to Pizza, that's who I picked. I think that she's a very attractive woman, and I could see why the man who beat both Cell and Majin Buu would be very interested in pursuing her.
Next thing you know, he's gonna beat Beerus.
Oh yeah.
Now, moving on to the next character on this list, I have Videl, the tough as nails Videl. What's interesting about Videl is that she looks at her best when she had the long hair. If you look at this little picture/clip that I'm about to show you right now, she looks completely male. Like, you could look at her as a complete guy. And I felt that she looked a bit too tomboyish with the short hair, but when Videl has the longer hair or when she has her pigtails, I think she's a very, very attractive girl. And I definitely see why Krillin and Gohan saw something in her.
Yeah, and Gohan did something more in her otherwise, but that's something for another day. In either case, my number 7 would have to be Erasa, who is Gohan's classmate at Orange Star School. And I have to say that she was also a very feisty and very attractive lady, also with a blonde hair, much like Pisa. But in either case, let me say that I thought she was very attractive.
Now, moving on to number 6 is Launch. And what I find interesting about Launch is that she has two personalities. She has the blue hair and she has the yellow hair. And what I find interesting about Launch is that I had a hard time ranking her because I kind of had to factor in both as if they were the same. And I personally have a slight preference for the blonde because of her personality. But because of Launch's body as a whole, I kind of like her slender build. She doesn't have the most curvaceous body out there, but I definitely like Launch as a looks, and definitely Master Roshi found something in her too, and she definitely enjoyed her company.
Oh yeah, I mean, what can you go wrong with having two different women in one? I mean, it's kind of like Mystique to a shorter degree, actually. For my number 6, I pick the purple-haired badass in Colonel Violet from the Red Ribbon Army in the Red Ribbon Army saga in Dragon Ball. Not only was she pretty, but she was very in for herself. And she showed that being tough can also be beautiful. So I picked her as number 6.
Now, moving on to number 5. You guys might not like her as soon as I say where she's from, but it's actually Valise from Dragon Ball GT. Now, I already know that there's going to be some people in the comments who are not happy with this because she's from GT. But Valise was a smoking babe. Although she was a little bit ditzy, and although she wasn't very aware of a lot of things like ice cream and all of that, but I gotta give young Son Goten some credit.
I guess Goten had some great taste, and he'd like to see her trying to taste that ice cream, if you know what I'm saying. For my number 5, I picked Launch. Again, two women in one. One's this feisty badass who will set you in your place and who's tough and can put any man down. And another one is a sweet homemaker. So certainly, I would have to say that Launch fits very well at number 5.
Now, we're moving on a little bit more into our top 4. I know you guys might think I'm saying this a little too early, but I'm going to put Bulma in her prime at number 4. And I've always felt that Toriyama teased Bulma so much. If Bulma was a real person, I think she was literally tortured in Dragon Ball by how many sexualized moments that she was involved with. If you look at Bulma, I think that with her bunny costume, with all of the different hairstyles that she has maintained a pretty good looking frame all throughout these years. And I think that's one of the reasons why I put her on the higher elm of this list. There's a reason why I rank the other characters a little bit higher than Bulma, but I definitely think Bulma was definitely a very, very attractive girl and a very, very, very attractive woman. But I think Bulma at her absolute best would be when she had long hair when they were summoning Purunga right after they had found out that Goku was actually still alive. I thought that's when she was at her absolute peak, in my opinion.
Absolutely. And for my number 4, I picked the Android 18. And of course, not only was she strong, not only was she beautiful, but she was enough for Krillin. And as we know, Krillin deserves the best of the best, and that's why Toriyama gave him at least one of them. So I picked her because, well, it's kind of hard not to put her on the top 5 of my list.
Well, speaking of 18, I actually have her at my number 3, and I gave 18 a very, very, very slight edge over Bulma, and I did it for several reasons. Yes, obviously you have to rank Bulma based on her prime, but when you look at characters as a whole, which does factor into this, I felt that, 18, for obvious reasons, she's a cyborg. She aged significantly better, but looking at 18 in GT, she looked identical to what she looked like earlier. She really didn't look like she aged as much. And that's why I'm going to have to give her a slight edge over Bulma, and also because of the fact that she's a fighter, and that sassy, sadistic personality that Android 18 has is very, very, very attractive. And I just think that with all of her outfits ranging from her boots, to everything with the pearl necklace, I feel that Android 18 was literally one of the top 3 babes in Dragon Ball.
Strong and sexy. Speaking of, I picked Videl. With the long hair would definitely have to be in number 3 on my list. She was strong, willing to learn. She showed that she could definitely do a lot with what she had. She trained her whole life and she was even stronger than her dad. So really, I have to say that Videl, she certainly picked a good suit, for Gohan.
Well, for my number 2, I have Roshi's Mermaid. If you guys go back to the episode Goku's Rival, and you actually look at the mermaid that they brought to Master Roshi, I felt that mermaid looked fantastic. She was gorgeous, and if she had a bigger role, she might have even been higher on this list, but she was so gorgeous that I definitely have to put that mermaid for my number 2 spot.
I mean, it would be great for the top half. It would just be confusing and kind of weird for the bottom. But for my number 2, I would have to say Bulma in her prime. Honestly, it's very hard for me to pick anyone above Bulma, but really, not only is Bulma incredibly attractive, she's also incredibly intelligent and incredibly useful in the series. And let's think about this. Vegeta, the Prince of all Saiyans, had his pick of any woman in the universe. The strongest man next to Goku. And who do you pick? Bulma. In my case, I have to say that if Bulma was good enough for Vegeta, well, I can't really argue with that now, can I?
Well, I mean, definitely Bulma has a lot to offer, and obviously she had a much bigger role than virtually everybody in the entire Dragon Ball world, because there really isn't any other female character that has had as much of an impact on the plot as a Bulma. But when you think about a number 1, and you think about a woman or a girl that just kicks ass, and when I think of my number 1, I think of no other than Pan! Why Pan? Because on Dragon Ball Xenoverse, she kicks a lot of ass for me. Pan does everything I want her to do on Xenoverse. I beat Dragon Ball Nation 11-0 with Pan, and other characters as well. I love using Pan on Xenoverse, and that is strictly the reason why I selected her number 1, because of her badassery in conjunction with being similar to the one and only Chloe Moretz. So that's why Pan is my number 1. If I wasn't kidding. Because my true number 1 is a character who was strictly created to be attractive, and I've been looking for this source for years. I cannot find it, but I remember when I was younger reading a source that said that the character I'm about to say is actually a more attractive version of another person we may or may not have mentioned on this list. And what is her name, Mike?
Her name is...
And why did we pick Marin, Mike? Because we both agree that Marin is number 1 on this list.
Because Marin has been created purely to be a hotter version of Bulma. And wow, did they set everything not only to 10, but 11 on Marin. She just went above the scale.
It's very funny how Krillin himself was able to get, literally, in my list and on your list, 2 of the top 5 women in Dragon Ball. It's very, very, very respectful for his standards, but when you really, really look at it, I think it's hands down that Marin wins this. She's curvaceous, she has a gorgeous face, and yes, we are not talking about Krillin's daughter, Marin, because at certain points of the show, you might actually consider that a little bit perverted.
Same with Pan. But absolutely, Marin definitely would have to be the hottest piece of female attractivity on my list.
But that doesn't end here, guys, because we actually have 5 honorable mentions for women. I actually have 7 honorable mentions, and I'll just briefly go through them and explain why. Mrs. Brief, I'll be brief. Miss Brief is actually on my list for one reason and one reason only. Miss Brief literally did not look like she aged at all. And that's incredible considering Mike actually concluded earlier that Mrs. Brief was actually 68 at the time that she died during the Buu saga. So considering the fact that a 68-year-old could look that good is one reason why I would have her there. I also follow up my next honorable mention with Anine, another reason that, Mike obviously put her on his list, but I definitely found Anine very attractive. And then when we move on to Gohan's high school, I felt that Arisa was cute too. She looks somewhat similar to Bulma with shorter hair and, a little bit more curvaceous body, but I definitely felt Arisa was cute. I don't know if she ever went out with Sharpener, but it's very ironic that, Sharpener and Arisa are together. Not really making an innuendo there. But moving on to the next one, we have Zangia, and I felt that she was a pretty interesting pick. She didn't make either of our lists because obviously it's kind of weird to rank an alien-looking character. But Zangia looks humanoid enough, and I definitely see why Krillin, found a little bit of an attraction in her. And next honorable mention is Angela, who was actually the girl that Gohan took out on that date in that episode where Gohan got blackmailed. Now, the next person I wanted to talk about is Tights. The reason I think Tights is an honorable mention is considering the fact that Tights was only in the manga volume of Jocko the Galactic Patrolman, and we never really got to see what Tights would look like if she actually was in the series herself. And I feel like if Tights was in the actual series, I felt that she would have been a lot better received, and she probably could have even made it higher on this list itself. As for my number 7, I have Bulla, and the reason I didn't put Bulla in my list is for two reasons. Number one, I think it's kind of weird considering how young she was. And number two, let's be honest, we all know that Toriyama has a tendency to create characters that look completely identical to others. And quite frankly, does Bulla really look any different from Bulma, Mike?
Not really.
Not at all. Does Goten look any different from Goku?
Does anyone in that family look any different at all in GT?
Not really. So if you really think about it, guys, that's the whole reason why I couldn't put Bulla on my list, but that essentially concludes my top 7.
Well, for my honorable mentions, there's a recurring theme that continues to happen, and that is that strength is sexy. I have, for the first honorable mention, Ranfan. And Ranfan, of course, is one of the competitors in the second tournament, in which Tien is there. And Ranfan is someone who uses not only her strength, but also her sexiness to actually get ahead in that tournament. Next, I'd have to say Husky, who is someone who was sent to retrieve the Dragon Balls from Goku and Bulma when they were at the theme park in the Dragon Ball anime. Now, of course, there was a funny scene where Husky actually dressed up as a fortune teller, and she said, "Oh, I see 2 balls under your clothes," to Goku. And of course, he dropped his pants to reveal 2 balls that were not Dragon Balls. And then, of course, there's someone who's incredibly strong. Traffic Agent Lady, who is also someone who would send people about on their way. With such authority, she would have to be incredibly strong. But then, of course, for classic attractiveness, there is Mai, from the Shu, Mai, and Pilaf gang. And I would have to say that she spent all those years pursuing Goku, and she never really aged a bit. In fact, she got younger. Maybe a little bit too young to include her at that point on this list, but still, she got pretty attractive. In either case, rounding out my top honorable mentions would have to be Western Supreme Kai, the female Kai of them all. Almost certainly, I would have to say the strongest woman is also one of the sexiest.
So guys, that has been our video for today. Overall, I had a lot of fun making this video, and I thought that this was a pretty interesting list. I finally got it off my chest, my top 10 most attractive anime women. I didn't put Champa's attendant because I don't even know what her name is, and I haven't really seen her in any scenes. But as far as this goes, I think that this is a pretty good list, and me and Mike spent a while thinking about, who ranks ahead of who, and we kind of had some clashes, as to explaining why we found one more attractive than the other. But overall, this has been a very fun video. If you guys have another list that you want me and Mike to do, as we previously did our other one where we correlated actors in real life to the Dragon Ball Z world, and I'd also like to see in the comment section you guys showing your list, but most importantly, over everything else, please remember to rate, comment, and subscribe. And to what, Mike?
Please remember to rate, comment, and subscribe. And as I always say, stick around, because there's a lot more to come in the future.
And remember, as I always say, to have a great day, guys. And I challenge Geekdom 101 and Super Jaiyan to get together and do a video response to us, because I'm sure Geekdom has a very, very colorful list that he would like to put together along with Super Jane, and that includes the rest of the Dragon Ball YouTubing community and all of you as a whole. So I hope you guys enjoyed.